The patrol ship's engines hummed quietly as Officer Nathan Wright guided his vessel through the star-dotted darkness of space. 6 months into his first assignment with the Earth Defense Fleet, he still felt a thrill every time he started his patrol route near the defense perimeter. His fingers tapped nervously on the control panel as he remembered the morning briefing. "Keep your eyes sharp out there," Lieutenant Susan Baker had warned during the morning brief. "We've got reports of raiders using old civilian ships as cover. Don't let appearances fool you." His small but sleek patrol craft, bearing the bright blue and white colors of the EDF, reflected the distant sunlight as it cruised through the designated sector. The patrol route was usually quiet, with only the occasional merchant vessel passing through after proper clearance. Nathan straightened in his pilot's chair when his sensor array beeped. An unmarked vessel had just entered his sector, moving at sublight speed. The ship showed no visible registration markers and looked like it had seen better days. Its hull was scratched and worn, the kind of wear that came from years of deep space travel. "Control, this is Officer Wright on Patrol Unit 247. I've got an unmarked vessel in Sector 7, requesting permission to investigate." The radio crackled. "Permission granted, Unit 247. Proceed with standard intercept protocol." Nathan's hands moved across the controls, adjusting his ship's course to intercept the mystery vessel. His heart beat faster as he switched on his external lights and broadcasting system. "Attention unidentified vessel, this is Earth Defense Fleet Patrol Unit 247. You have entered a restricted zone. Cut your engines and prepare for inspection." For a moment, there was no response. Nathan's finger hovered over the weapon systems, just in case. The lieutenant's warning echoed in his mind. Then the comm system crackled to life. "Patrol Unit 247, this is Private Vessel Star Wanderer. Cutting engines now." The voice was deep and calm, showing no signs of concern. Nathan watched as the old ship slowed to a stop. Up close, it looked even more worn than his sensors had indicated. The hull plating was mismatched in places, showing signs of multiple repairs. This wasn't the kind of ship that should be anywhere near Earth's defense perimeter. Following procedure, Nathan ran his initial scans. The results made him frown. The ship's energy signature was oddly low for its size, and his sensors couldn't get a clear reading on its cargo hold. That set off red flags in his mind. "Star Wanderer, prepare for docking procedure. I'll be conducting a physical inspection." "Understood, officer," came the same calm voice. Nathan guided his patrol ship into position, extending the docking tube between the vessels. He double-checked his sidearm and straightened his uniform before heading to the airlock. The worn appearance of the ship and its suspicious readings had him on edge. The docking tube pressurized with a hiss. Nathan took a deep breath and moved through it, noting more signs of wear up close. The ship's exterior access panel looked ancient, but it opened smoothly enough when he entered the standard override code. The ship's airlock cycled, and Nathan stepped inside, his hand resting near his weapon. The interior lighting was dim, and the air had the stale smell common to older space vessels. But something felt off. Despite the ship's worn appearance, the systems were running perfectly, too perfectly for a vessel this old. "Hello, officer," came the voice he heard over the comm. A tall man stepped into view from the ship's main corridor. He wore simple civilian clothes, but his posture was perfect, military perfect. His dark skin contrasted with graying hair, and his eyes held a sharp intelligence that made Nathan pause. "Your registration and flight plan," Nathan demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. Something about this man made him nervous, but he couldn't explain why. The man smiled slightly. "Of course." He reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out a data chip. "You'll find everything in order, Officer Wright." Nathan took the chip, noticing the man knew his name without being told. He inserted it into his handheld scanner, waiting for the data to load. The ship's documents were coming up blank. No registration, no flight plan, nothing. "Sir, this chip is empty," Nathan said, his hand moving closer to his weapon. "I need valid documentation, or I'll have to place you under arrest." The man's smile didn't waver. "Check again, Officer Wright. But this time, use your emergency override clearance. Level Alpha." Nathan's eyes widened. Level Alpha clearance was the highest in the fleet, the kind reserved for admirals and fleet commanders. His hands shaking slightly, he entered the override code. The scanner screen suddenly filled with data, all marked with the highest security classifications he'd ever seen. Nathan looked up at the man, who still stood there calmly, hands clasped behind his back. "Who are you?" Nathan whispered, though a sinking feeling told him he'd made a terrible mistake. The man stepped forward, his bearing now unmistakably military. "We'll get to that, Officer Wright. But first, let's discuss your approach to this inspection. I'm particularly interested in your assumptions about this vessel and its pilot." Nathan's stomach dropped as he realized this routine patrol had just become anything but routine. Nathan felt his throat go dry as he stared at the man before him. The worn civilian clothes couldn't hide the military bearing anymore, but pride and stubbornness made him press on with the inspection. He'd started this, and he would finish it properly. "Sir, regardless of clearance levels, I still need to complete my inspection. Protocol requires me to check the cargo hold." Nathan kept his voice firm, though his confidence was shaking. Marcus Jones nodded, that same calm smile still on his face. "By all means, Officer Wright. Please, follow me." He turned and walked deeper into the ship, his movements precise and measured. The ship's corridors were narrow and dimly lit, with exposed pipes and wiring running along the walls. Nathan followed, noting how everything, despite its aged appearance, functioned perfectly. No loose panels, no malfunctioning lights, no rattling in the life support systems. It was like walking through a carefully crafted stage set. "The cargo hold is through here," Marcus said, pressing his palm against a scanner. The door slid open silently, too silently for a ship this old. Nathan stepped into the cargo hold and froze. Instead of the cramped, cluttered space he expected, he found himself in a state-of-the-art command center. Holographic displays lined the walls, showing real-time data from across the defense perimeter. In the center stood a sophisticated tactical table, currently displaying a map of all patrol routes in the sector. "Are you beginning to understand, Officer Wright?" Marcus asked, walking over to the tactical table. "Or do you need to check for smuggled goods under the console?" Nathan felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. "Sir, I was just following protocol. We had reports of raiders using old ships as cover." "Yes, Lieutenant Baker's morning briefing." Marcus nodded, pulling up a holographic file. "I know, I'd authorized that warning myself. Tell me, Officer Wright, what made you so certain this was a suspicious vessel?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "The ship's condition, sir. The outdated model. The lack of visible registration. The unusual energy readings." "All carefully planned," Marcus said, pressing a button that made the ship's exterior image appear above the tactical table. "This vessel cost more than your entire patrol fleet. Every scratch, every repair mark, every malfunction was engineered to create a specific impression. The question is, Officer Wright, what did you do with that impression?" The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. He remembered his aggressive tone over the comm, his hand constantly near his weapon, the suspicious glances he cast around the ship. "I made assumptions, sir," Nathan admitted quietly. "Indeed you did." Marcus walked around the tactical table, his eyes never leaving Nathan. "You saw an old ship and assumed criminal intent. You saw worn clothes and decided I couldn't possibly have legitimate business in this sector. Tell me, did my appearance factor into your assumptions as well?" Nathan wanted to deny it, but honesty forced him to nod slightly. He had noticed the man's dark skin, and somewhere in his mind it had added to his suspicions. The realization made him feel sick. "The Earth Defense Fleet protects all of humanity, Officer Wright," Marcus continued, his voice firm but not unkind. "We defend every ship, every colony, every person, regardless of their appearance, their wealth, or their background. The moment we let prejudice guide our actions is the moment we fail in our duty." "Yes, sir," Nathan managed to say. "I understand." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Do you? Let's review your inspection, shall we?" He pressed another button, and holographic screens appeared showing Nathan's approach to the ship, his body language during the inspection, every moment of his prejudiced behavior. "Your hand never left your weapon. You spoke with unnecessary aggression. You treated me as guilty until proven innocent." Marcus paused the replay. "Now, imagine if I had been exactly what I appeared to be, a civilian pilot in an old but legal vessel. How would this interaction have affected their view of the fleet, their trust in our protection? Nathan watched himself on the replay, seeing his behavior through new eyes. It would have damaged that trust, sir. They would have felt targeted, not protected. Correct. Marcus turned off the holographic display. The fleet receives thousands of complaints each year about patrol officers showing bias. Some act on assumptions about old ships, others on the pilot's appearance or accent. Each incident erodes the trust we need to do our job effectively. A new screen appeared, showing statistics about civilian complaints, trust ratings, and patrol effectiveness. The numbers told a clear story of how prejudice hurt not just the civilians but the fleet's ability to maintain real security. Sir, Nathan said, straightening his posture, I want to apologize. My behavior was unprofessional and prejudiced. It won't happen again. Marcus studied him for a long moment. No, Officer Wright, an apology isn't enough. Actions matter more than words. What are you going to do differently? Nathan thought carefully before answering. I'll follow protocol without letting assumptions cloud my judgment. Every ship, every person deserves the same professional treatment, and I'll speak up if I see other officers making the same mistakes. Better, Marcus nodded. But still not enough. The problems in our patrol protocols run deeper than individual officers. They need systematic change. He pulled up another file. That's why I'm out here, testing responses, gathering data. We need to rebuild our approach from the ground up. Nathan looked at the data scrolling past, showing similar incidents across the fleet. Sir, who are you really? Marcus smiled and pressed one final button. His civilian clothes shimmered and disappeared, replaced by a fleet admiral's uniform with 5 stars on the collar. Admiral Marcus Jones, newly appointed commander of the Earth Defense Fleet. And you, Officer Wright, have just helped me prove how desperately we need changes in our patrol protocols. Nathan snapped to attention, his face pale. Admiral, sir. Aye. At ease, officer, Marcus said, raising a hand. You're not in trouble. In fact, you've helped me more than you know. Your reactions, while problematic, were typical of our current patrol force. That gives us a baseline to work from. He looked at Nathan thoughtfully. The question is, are you willing to be part of the solution? Nathan stood frozen in the advanced command center, his mind struggling to process the situation. Before him stood not just any admiral, but the commander of the entire Earth Defense Fleet. The same man he had treated with suspicion and barely concealed hostility just minutes earlier. Please, sit down, Officer Wright. Admiral Jones gestured to one of the command chairs. I believe we need to have a serious discussion about the future of our patrol protocols. Nathan sank into the chair, trying to maintain his composure. The Admiral pressed several buttons on the tactical table, bringing up a series of holographic displays showing patrol incidents from across the fleet. What you're seeing, Admiral Jones explained, is 6 months of data from my undercover inspections. In 73% of stops, officers showed clear bias based on ship appearance. In 58%, they demonstrated prejudice based on the pilot's personal characteristics. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Your stop today will be added to these statistics. Admiral, sir. Nathan found his voice. Why this approach? Why not simply review our procedures from Fleet Command? Admiral Jones smiled. Because reading reports doesn't show us the truth, Officer Wright. I needed to experience these encounters firsthand. Feel the tension when an officer's hand rests too eagerly on their weapon. See the dismissive looks. Hear the tone of voice that says guilty before a word is spoken. The Admiral brought up the recording of Nathan's inspection again. Watch yourself, officer. Not just your actions, but your expressions. The subtle ways bias influences behavior. Nathan watched himself on the screen, seeing his actions from a new perspective. The way he had squared his shoulders aggressively, his suspicious glances, his tone of voice, all of it painted a clear picture of prejudice in action. The hardest part of fixing a problem, Admiral Jones continued, is admitting it exists. The fleet prides itself on protecting humanity, but we've allowed our own biases to compromise that mission. The tactical table now displayed a map of human space, with red dots indicating locations of reported patrol incidents. Each of these points represents a civilian who lost faith in us, a citizen who no longer trusts the fleet to protect them, a potential ally who now sees us as a threat. Nathan leaned forward, studying the pattern. The incidents clustered around trade routes and colony approaches, places where regular citizens needed fleet protection most. "Sir, I understand the problem now," Nathan said quietly. "But how do we fix it? These biases, they run deep." Admiral Jones nodded approvingly at the question. "That's exactly what I'm here to figure out. And that's where you come in, Officer Wright." "Me, sir?" Nathan looked up in surprise. "Yes, you." The Admiral pulled up Nathan's service record. "Despite today's incident, your record shows promise. You're direct, honest, and most importantly, you're capable of admitting mistakes and learning from them." The Admiral pressed another button, and a new document appeared. "Project Eclipse, Patrol Protocol Reform Initiative." "I'm assembling a task force," Admiral Jones explained. "Officers from across the fleet who've shown the potential to drive real change. We need people who've experienced these problems firsthand and understand why they need to be fixed." Nathan read through the project outline with growing interest. It was comprehensive: new training programs, revised protocols, advanced simulation scenarios, and most importantly, a complete overhaul of how patrol officers approached civilian encounters. "The fleet's current approach focuses on threat detection," Admiral Jones continued. "We train officers to look for signs of danger, but in doing so, we taught them to see threats where none exist. Project Eclipse will change that focus to community protection and service." The Admiral stood and walked to a window, looking out at the stars. "When I took command of the fleet 3 months ago, I made a promise to reshape our organization. Not just our ships and technology, but our culture, our values, our very understanding of what it means to protect humanity." He turned back to Nathan. "Today's inspection was your test, Officer Wright, not just of your procedures, but of your character. You showed bias, yes, but you also showed the capacity to recognize and learn from your mistakes. That's what we need." Nathan felt the weight of the moment. "What exactly are you asking of me, Admiral?" "I'm offering you a choice," Admiral Jones said. "You can return to your patrol duties with a reprimand in your file for today's incident, or you can join Project Eclipse. Help us build a better fleet. Show other officers the same truths you learned today." The Admiral's eyes met Nathan's. "But understand this, if you join us, the work will be hard. You'll face resistance from officers who don't want to change. You'll have to confront your own biases daily, and you'll need to help others do the same." Nathan looked again at the map of reported incidents, each red dot representing a failure of the fleet's mission. He thought about how easily he had slipped into prejudiced behavior, how quickly he had forgotten his oath to protect all of humanity. "Sir," Nathan stood at attention, "I want to be part of the solution. I want to join Project Eclipse." Admiral Jones smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "Excellent. But remember, Officer Wright, this isn't about redemption for one bad inspection. It's about creating lasting change throughout the fleet. Are you ready for that responsibility?" Nathan met the Admiral's gaze steadily. "Yes, sir, I am." "Then welcome aboard, Officer Wright." Admiral Jones extended his hand. "Let's build a fleet that truly serves all of humanity." As they shook hands, Nathan realized that what had started as the worst day of his career had become something entirely different. The beginning of real change, not just for him, but for the entire Earth Defense Fleet. 3 weeks after the life-changing encounter with Admiral Jones, Nathan found himself standing before a group of patrol officers in the fleet's main training facility. The room buzzed with quiet conversation as officers from various patrol sectors gathered for what they thought was routine training. "Good morning, everyone," Nathan started, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I'm Officer Nathan Wright, and today we're going to talk about an incident that changed my entire perspective on patrol duty." The holographic display behind him flickered to life, showing the recording of his encounter with Admiral Jones. Nathan watched his fellow officers' expressions change as the scene unfolded, from amusement to discomfort, then to understanding as the Admiral's identity was revealed. "3 weeks ago, I thought I was just doing my job," Nathan continued. "I saw an old ship and made assumptions. I saw the pilot and made more assumptions. I was wrong on every count." Admiral Jones stepped out from the side of the room, still wearing the same worn civilian clothes from the recording. The officers immediately jumped to attention. At ease, the admiral said, walking to join Nathan, "What Officer Wright is sharing today isn't just his story. It's a reflection of a larger problem within our fleet." The admiral activated another display, showing patrol statistics from across human space. "Every day, we make thousands of patrol stops, and every day, we damage the trust between the fleet and the people we're sworn to protect." Nathan picked up the presentation, pointing to specific incidents. "Look at these cases. Ships delayed for hours because they looked suspicious. Civilian pilots treated like criminals because of their appearance. Colony vessels subjected to excessive searches because they came from less developed regions." The room had grown completely quiet. Nathan could see officers shifting uncomfortably in their seats, perhaps remembering their own similar incidents. "But this isn't about making anyone feel guilty," Admiral Jones added. "This is about learning and improving. Officer Wright, share with them what you've learned since that day." Nathan nodded and pulled up a new set of images. "These are patrol stops I've made in the past 3 weeks, but with a different approach. Instead of looking for threats, I focused on protection and service." The images showed Nathan interacting with various ships and pilots, helping a colony vessel with navigation issues, assisting a merchant with emergency repairs, guiding a lost mining ship back to its designated route. "The results speak for themselves," he continued. "Response times improved by 40%. Civilian satisfaction ratings increased by 65%. And most importantly, we actually caught more genuine security threats because we weren't wasting time on baseless suspicions." Admiral Jones stepped forward again. "This is why we're launching Project Eclipse, a complete overhaul of how we approach patrol duty. And all of you are here because you've shown the potential to be part of this change." The Admiral brought up the Project Eclipse overview. New protocols, updated training, but most importantly, a new mindset. We're not just law enforcement. We're guardians, helpers, the face of the fleet to every civilian we encounter. Nathan watched as understanding dawned on his fellow officers' faces. He remembered his own moment of realization in that command center 3 weeks ago. "Let me share something specific," Nathan said, pulling up another patrol recording. 2 days ago, I encountered a ship similar to the Admiral's disguise. Old, worn, seemingly suspicious. But instead of assuming the worst, I followed our new protocols." The recording showed Nathan approaching the vessel professionally, offering assistance before making demands. The result: they discovered the ship was carrying crucial medical supplies to an outer colony, and Nathan's help actually got them there faster. "That's the difference," Admiral Jones commented. "Instead of creating problems, we solved them. Instead of looking for threats, we found ways to help." One of the officers raised her hand. "Sir, what about actual security threats? Aren't we putting ourselves at risk by being less suspicious?" Nathan smiled. "Actually, the opposite is true. When we treat every worn ship and different-looking pilot as suspicious, we miss the real warning signs. True threats hide behind perfect paperwork and shiny ships just as often as not." He brought up another set of statistics. "In the past 3 weeks, patrols using the new protocols have caught more genuine security violations than traditional patrols. Why? Because we're paying attention to actual suspicious behavior, not just appearances." Admiral Jones nodded approvingly. "This is why Officer Wright is here today. He experienced this change firsthand. He made mistakes, learned from them, and improved. Now he's helping others do the same." Nathan faced his fellow officers. "I'm not going to lie, changing how we think and act isn't easy. I still catch myself making assumptions sometimes. But now I recognize them and correct myself. That's what this training is about." The Admiral stepped forward one final time. "You're all here because we believe you can handle this change, because we trust you to help build a better fleet. The question is, are you ready to challenge your own assumptions? To learn from mistakes like Officer Wright did?" The room was silent for a moment before one officer stood up. "Sir, I have a confession to make. I did almost the same thing last week. Hassled a ship because it looked old. Never even considered they might need help instead of suspicion." Others began nodding, sharing similar stories. Nathan saw what Admiral Jones had seen in him, the capacity to learn and change. "That's exactly why we're here," Nathan said. "Not to shame anyone, but to learn together. To build a fleet that truly serves and protects everyone, regardless of their ship's age or their personal appearance. As the training session continued, Nathan caught Admiral Jones's approving nod. They both knew this was just the beginning, but it was a good beginning. The fleet was changing, one officer at a time, and Nathan was proud to be part of that change. 6 months after his encounter with Admiral Jones, Nathan stood in the observation deck of Fleet Headquarters, watching patrol ships come and go against the backdrop of Earth. Each vessel now carried the new protocols he had helped develop, protocols that were changing the face of the fleet. Quite a view, isn't it? They watched another patrol ship assist a civilian vessel, the interaction smooth and professional. "There's something else you should see," Admiral Jones said, bringing up a new display. It showed Nathan's original inspection recording, but this time focusing on the civilian ships nearby. Watch their reactions. Nathan saw how other ships had tensed, prepared for trouble, expecting to see another biased patrol stop. They were ready for the worst. Exactly. Now look at current patrol footage. The display shifted to recent recordings. Civilian ships remained calm during patrol interactions. Some even signaled for assistance when they saw fleet vessels approach. "That's the real measure of our success," the Admiral said quietly. "Not statistics or reports, but trust. They're not afraid of us anymore." Nathan nodded, understanding. "What's our next step, sir?" "First, you'll pick your implementation team for the Colonial project. Then we'll need to adapt the training programs for local conditions. And we'll need to." The Admiral was interrupted by an alert signal. A holographic message appeared. "Multiple ships in distress at the edge of colonial space." "Perfect timing," Admiral Jones said. "Care to show me how the new protocols handle a real crisis, Lieutenant?" Nathan straightened. "Yes, sir." He quickly accessed the patrol coordination system, dispatching response teams now, prioritizing assistance over investigation. They watched as patrol ships moved smoothly into action, each crew operating under the new protocols. No bias, no assumptions, just professional help for those in need. 6 months ago, those patrol ships would have treated it as a security threat first, the Admiral observed. Now look at them. The patrol vessels were already organizing a rescue operation, coordinating with civilian ships in the area, focusing on saving lives rather than checking papers. "This is what the fleet should have been all along," Nathan said softly. "This is what we're supposed to do." Admiral Jones placed a hand on his shoulder. "And this is just the beginning, Lieutenant. We changed patrol protocols. Next, we'll change the whole fleet, one officer at a time." As they watched the rescue operation unfold, Nathan felt pride in how far they'd come. From a single bias patrol stop to a complete transformation of fleet operations. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was getting better every day. "Ready to get back to work?" the Admiral asked. Nathan touched his new rank insignia and smiled. "Yes, sir, we got a lot more to do." They turned away from the window together, leaving behind the old fleet and walking toward the future they were building. One where every ship, every person could trust in the protection of the Earth Defense Fleet.